So after a number of years where I've done videos for individual service items on my car, I thought why not make one video that incorporates all the common service items for the TFSI engine into one easy to follow video that'll have all your tools listed, all the part numbers for the parts you'll need, plus any relevant torque specs as well. So this is what this video is going to be. It might be the fastest on YouTube and also the best for the whole service on that TFSI engine. I'll also later on tell you in the video how to get a hold of a job card, which will have this full video documented there so you can read it on your phone, or you can print it off and have it beside you when you're planning on doing work on your own car as well. Oh, and just if you're wondering what is covered in this video for these service items, then I'll put a list on the screen just now so you can see what items are covering in this video, and also there'll be chapters along in the timeline so you can skip the relevant parts if there's only one part you want to look to service on your car. So with the car currently still in the driveway, we're going to get the car turned on and up to operating temperature. This is because I'm going to be adding some Wynn's engine oil flush to the engine. So while the engine heats up, what we're going to do is fill in the service book with all the details of the products we're using today for the service. And we'll fill in the date and the miles for the next service later on in the video. Now once the engine's up to temperature, turn it off and then add the engine oil flush to the top of the engine. The instructions for Wynn's engine oil flush says to leave it in idling engine for 20 minutes. Now to save some time while it was idling, I brought it into the garage, jacked up and secured it on axle stands. Once the 20 minutes was up, I then turned the engine off, removed the oil filler cap and then removed the sump plug. Please be aware that this oil is still going to be quite warm, so just watch you're wearing gloves and that you don't cover yourself in hot oil. Now as the oil is draining out there, I'm inspecting my sump plug, which is a magnetic sump plug that I've bought, and it just basically collects all the tiny wee filings that you get in any engine with wear and tear, and they get collected on the end of the magnet. So you just clear off the magnet to make sure it's clean. This is where I got mine from, Awesome GTI online if you want to get one yourself. And then once it's all cleaned up, pop it back into the sump and tighten up. Obviously make sure all the oil has now stopped draining out of the sump. Now moving on to the oil filter housing at the front. So what you can do is remove this wee cap here, and behind it is a wee orange plastic valve. I use a screwdriver, push this in to drain the oil out, but you can buy a special VAG specialist tool online that will stop all this extra mess. While that oil drained out, I then decided to just crack on with other jobs in the car, so I popped the oil cap back on. I then had to take off the feeder hose to the coolant bottle, forgetting that the coolant was still red hot and spurted everywhere. I'm now removing my Creation Motorsport engine cover off the car so I can access a lot more service parts on my engine. And if you've got a standard engine cover with the airbox contained inside, here's how you go about taking it out. So you pull at the top of the engine cover and at the bottom, and it's just to try and prise off the 4 rubber grommets that hold the engine cover onto the engine. Once it's off, flip it over and then remove all the screws that hold these two pieces together. Now you can fit a brand new air filter if you want, if it's a standard one, or if it's a specialist performance one, you can just follow the instructions to service this item. When putting the cover back together, make sure you clip it in at the top beside the air filter first before then folding it down and putting the screws back in. Now if you've got an induction kit like I do here, I'd be looking to inspect this and clear it of any sort of debris, and also oil it if it requires oiling at the same time. As you can see, my one has started to deteriorate and corrode over the years now, with moisture getting to the wire mesh that holds it all together. I tried to clear as much of the corrosion off as possible and then blow it out with compressed air as well, just to make sure it's as clean as possible going back into the engine. Next up now is the cam follower. Now I would say this is one of the most important parts to check, if not replace, on your car every time you do a service. Getting access to inspect the cam follower is fairly straightforward. You just take off the pipe for the PCV valve, you then take off the wire connection for the pressure sensor, then at the top of the fuel pump take off that connector as well. Then this pressure relief valve at the side. If you then take off the black plastic cap, pop a cloth underneath it, and it's like basically a tire valve. Push it gently, make sure you're wearing glasses of course because it is under pressure, and release as much pressure of that fuel as possible. Then going on to get a spanner to remove that actual bolt itself once the pressure's been released. Again, putting a cloth underneath just in case any more fuel comes out. And using a 17mm spanner to remove the union bolt down at the bottom there, and it takes off the fuel line from the bottom of the high pressure fuel pump. Then with the T30 Torx, you're looking to take out the 3 bolts that hold the high pressure fuel pump onto the engine. Sadly in my case here, I ran into difficulty where one of the bolts was rounding off inside. I did fix it in a few seconds, but if you do have any problems like this, make sure you do buy 3 brand new bolts to pop back in so you don't have this issue in future. Now once the 3 bolts are out, if you're having problems getting the fuel pump off, maybe taking off the second PCV pipe will help get access to it. Once it's out of the way, you can see the cam follower in there, so just pull out with your finger and inspect it for any form of damage or wear. If you think it's worn too much, then you can just then replace it, but my one here looked like it was in really good condition, so I've just put it back into the engine. Now cam followers are vitally important. If they do go all the way through and your fuel pump is then hitting your camshaft directly without the cam follower in place, it can cause major damage to your engine, so please make sure you're checking these every service. Now it's advised that you do replace the wee O-ring on the fuel pump every time you do this check to make sure there's no oil leaks off the fuel pump. And if you put a brand new cam follower in, make sure you lubricate it up first before you pop it into the side of the camshaft. And as you'd expect, refitting is just a reversal of how you took it all apart. And the relevant torque values will be on screen for each component. Now, if you're subscribed to the monthly newsletter that I send out each month that's filled with car content, you'll have access also to these free job cards that I'm now making for each video. So every video will be detailed down on these job cards regarding the tools you require, the step-by-step process to go through, and also the torque values you require for any bolts or nuts. These job cards will be available for all upcoming videos, and I'm also planning on backdating all the previous videos on the channel as well. So if that might be of use to you, then just click the link down below in the description or the pinned comment in the comment section, and that will take you to a link to sign up to the newsletter and get access to these job cards. So going back onto the car now, we're going to close off the valve for the oil filter housing to make sure no more oil comes out. And then using a 36mm socket, we're going to remove the oil filter housing completely from the engine. Up on the workbench, we're going to take off the old filter, and then we're going to use a pick to prise out the old seal on the housing. You'll find a new seal in along with your new oil filter, so if you get the seal and coat it with some engine oil just before you pop it back into your oil filter housing. Then just push on your new oil filter onto the housing and you'll hear a positive click as it goes on. Now before refitting the oil filter, I like to do a quick inspection of the area on the engine before I do, make sure there's no damage, and then give it a quick clean up, torque the new filter housing onto the car to the following specs, which will probably be written on the housing itself as well. And then finally replace the cap over the end of the valve, and then give the whole area a complete clean to make sure there's no excess oil left lying around. Now the engine oil I've gone for is Quantum 5W40 here. There's loads of other options as well, including Miller's Nano Drive. It's quite a popular option as well. If you're not too sure, do look up the specifications in your manual to make sure you're using the right oil. Now because these engines hold roughly about 4.6 litres of oil when they're completely dry, I'm going to add 4 litres of oil for the moment. Now this part is optional. If you want to circulate oil around the engine before actually properly starting it, have the coil packs disconnected and then turn the engine over a couple of times just for a few seconds. Now after leaving the engine sit for a minute or so, I'm going to check the dipstick to see the levels, and going by this, it's spot on between min and max, so I'm not going to add any more oil at this time. A quick thing to add here, if you have got an engine under tray, I wouldn't put it on the car just yet. I'd run the car for a few days just to make sure there's no oil leaks, then pop the tray back on. If you pop the tray on and there is a leak, the leak will go into the tray, and by the time you actually realise you've got a leak, it'll be far too late. Moving on now to the pollen filter for the interior of the car. Now this is a really straightforward job. You've got 2 plastic clips that you just spin off, and then you've got 3 Torx bits that you take off along the front edge here. Then this cover just pulls off. Then you have another cover that sits over the pollen filter itself, so slide it off to the left, watch yourself. A lot of debris does come out, sadly, and then just slide the pollen filter down towards the footwell. Taking it outside, have a quick look inside to see that there is a lot of debris inside it. Even after being changed very recently, there's still quite a lot of stuff inside the filter, and I checked inside the housing as well. With my new filter, I then popped up to the car, make sure that you have the angled edge to the left hand side, making sure that it fits in nice and snug, and then just push it slowly upwards back into the housing. Once it's in properly, I've added a tiny wee screw that was missing before on this cover, so I popped a wee screw in here and then slide it across to the right and then tighten the single screw back up. And then of course just fitting the cover back on with the 3 Torx screws and the 2 wee plastic rub screws as well. See, I told you it was easy. Now onto the spark plugs. So we're using these NGK iridium spark plugs that are recommended for this engine. To gain access to them, we're going to take off the 2 screws again that hold on the wiring harness for the coil packs, take them out of the way, and then prise up the coil packs gently using a bit of cloth and a long screwdriver. The last coil pack was a wee bit corroded here, so maybe a bit of moisture has got into the spark plug hole, and that's what's happened. I also do a quick inspection down in each of the plug holes, and then I take a hoover along in case there is any sort of debris and take any debris out with the hoover. Then exchanging one spark plug at a time, I just take them out, inspect them quickly to see if there's any sort of damage or any reason that the engine could be causing damage to the spark plug, and then pop the new one in place of it. Make sure that you pop them in and you tighten up by hand first to make sure you don't cross thread the spark plug. Finally, I spray some contact cleaner across the wiring harness before sticking it onto the coil packs. And then finally securing with the 2 screws. So when getting a fuel filter for this car, make sure it's the 6.6 bar option you choose. There is one that's about 4 bar, but these are no use for this engine. Make sure it says 6.6 on the packaging or on the specs for it. Also, you might find it slightly easier if you have these fuel filter pliers as well. They sometimes make it easier to get the connections off, but it's up to yourself. You'll find the fuel filter located on the right hand side of the car, so driver's side for me. If you look underneath the car, up past the sill towards the back wheel, you'll see it sitting up beside the fuel tank. So to remove the fuel filter, first of all, take the wee bracket off by taking out the T20 Torx that's holding it on. Once it's removed, you can start then taking off the pipes for the fuel filter. So this bottom pipe here, make sure that you're wearing glass at the same time because again it's under pressure. I used the pliers but it wasn't making much of a difference. You just got to push in the wee tabs very carefully and then start pulling it outwards and it will slip off the connection. Make sure you have a cloth handy as well to catch any excess fuel. Then it's the same process for the other 2 connections as well. Just make sure you don't break these connections because you have got a big problem then if you do. And I use the caps of the new fuel filter to pop on the old fuel filter to stop fuel pouring out of it. Now offering up the new fuel filter to the pipes and just putting each of them back on in the same way they came off, making sure you get a positive click for each one so that it's properly held in place. And then finally tightening up the bracket with the screw. Now you want to check this, make sure there's no leaks, so what I do is I prime the fuel pump a few times just by turning on the ignition and turn it back off again. After 2 or 3 times then turn it on and properly start it and then have a quick look down and make sure there's no leaks. Obviously wear glasses as you're checking for leaks. If it's all fine then you can take the car off the jack and lower it onto the ground. And then the one last final job to do is just to go into your car, into the on-screen dashboard menu and go down to your service interval and just reset it. Once you've reset it, use the details on the screen for the next upcoming service to transfer that into your service book for the new miles and the new date. So just how quick was that full TFSI service video? Was it record breaking on YouTube? I don't know until I do the edit anyway, but if you have enjoyed the video or got any questions or feedback, please drop it down below in the comments. Also hit the thumbs up button and hit subscribe if you want to catch more videos from the channel in the future, and I'll catch you next time. Cheers.